Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and today I want to talk about kingmaking. Kingmaking, we'll start with the definition, timestamps as always, so that you can skip to whatever section you want, but, well, let's get into it. Kingmaking is the idea that through an action in a game, you transfer the win condition from one player to another. In other words, just using the most basic example, let's say Sarah's about to win a game right now, and then you, through your action, you take a move, and then now John is winning the game instead. You, in other words, transferred who is winning because of the action you took. That's the general concept of kingmaking. It's the idea that you, in some way, adjusted who would win, and the definition from there might stray. My definition specifically, and again, I think my definition to a degree is the generally accepted definition, although you will definitely find, I'm sure you can find 50-page threads on Board Game Geek about what kingmaking is and is not. My definition usually comes down to when you transfer the win condition in a way that didn't even further your own goals. We'll get to that. I'll go through my whole list of everything. But again, kingmaking is the idea that through an action you transfer who the win condition is. It can be done in any way, shape, or form. It could be as simple as when you're playing Catan, you sit there and you exchange goods and you trade goods with somebody else in a clearly inefficient trade that results in Harry now winning the game because he's at 10 points. Any of the games on the table are inherently victim to kingmaking. Area control is very often a game style that can have kingmaking in it because of the very nature that as I move into one territory, I'm taking away something from you, and that might switch the relative positions of somebody else. Games like Cyclades, games like Inish, like Kemet, like Blood Rage, all of these games, Battle for Rokugan, all of these, Root, any of these games inherently have the possibility of kingmaking within their DNA. Again, the nature of the fact that as I take from you, I am switching the balance of power, and that could result in the potential question about what is and isn't kingmaking and who won the game. But then we have games like QE and High Society, where the person who has the least amount of money inherently loses, and that results in an interesting situation that you might be playing very inefficiently and about to lose, and I'll win because of that, but then someone else makes a terrible play and ends up switching themselves to having the least amount of money, and now they're losing, putting you in the win because you no longer have the least amount of money. Again, it's not just area control. Even games like No Thanks in Colorado, tiny boxes like this, because of the nature of what you take and how what you take inherently infringes upon the other player. In No Thanks, when I take a card, someone else is not taking the card. In Colorado, when I take a set of cards, someone else is not taking that set of cards. So through my actions, I can not only adjust and affect my own score, but the scores of somebody else, and therefore the relative positioning of everyone else at the table. And when I do so in a way that causes me to win, it's obviously the right move. When I do so in a way that does not result in me having the win, but instead results in someone else at the table having the win, that is when this conversation comes up. And from there, let's move to the second thing before we get into anything else. This only matters. It doesn't matter at all. This entire video is silly. I'm just talking about this video because I like talking about games. I like talking about the subject of games. But this video inherently is a conversation about who won or who didn't win. That's the point of this video. When you won, was it fair or was it kingmaking? None of this matters if you don't care about winning. I did a video recently, I'll link to it down below, about the nature of winning in board games. Does it matter, does it not? And for me, it does not matter. I don't care who won the game, I care about how I played. And how I played and whether I played well or not doesn't change whether or not you king-made someone else into the winner. I don't care. Is it an interesting conversation about the fact that you did this, should you have done that, doesn't make sense, is the right move? Of course it's an interesting conversation, if you like talking about games. But I want to emphasize strongly, and potentially repeatedly across this video, none of this matters. I just like talking about games, and that's why this video exists. This doesn't matter if you don't care about winning, and I do not. Secondly, or thirdly, depending on what step we're up to. Thirdly, these are my rules. This is my definition of kingmaking. This is how I approach the subject. Feel free to use it or not use it. Feel free to remind yourself that none of it matters. But this is just my own hierarchy of play of what I feel makes sense and what I feel is a legitimate move. When you make a illegitimate move according to my own definitions, it doesn't really matter. More often than not, kingmaking as a concept only really comes into play at the end of the game. Moves you make during the game, and it can change. Sometimes you can have really inefficient moves in a game that everyone would agree are just stupid, but that's usually not the problem at play. Usually we're talking about endgame moves. We're talking about that final adjustment as you transfer the win condition in the last few turns. And so even if you do something that I think is not reasonable, it doesn't really matter. Again, I'm going to keep saying that. None of this matters. So, let's get into it. The hierarchy of play. This, for me, is my own personal listing of what I consider to be the hierarchy of play as far as what kingmaking is and isn't, what is a reasonable move, what is not. Feel free to use these rules yourself. Feel free to not use these rules. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. There's only sometimes I can say it, but it's worth repeating. This is a video dedicated to who won and who didn't win, and it's so antithetical to what I believe that I have to say again and again. This is just a conversation for the sake of talking about board games. So, the prime focus, in my opinion, is, are you doing something to in any way further your chances of winning? That's the first rule. If you are doing anything that furthers your chances of winning, then it doesn't matter what you did, it is the correct move. In other words, when I sat there and I took those cards from you, no thanks, and therefore transferred the win from you to Jessica, I'm just keep coming up with random names here, it doesn't matter if that was the right move for me. If it was the move that in any way, in any marginal percentage of a chance way, increased my chances of winning, then it's the right move. If it does not increase my chances of winning, and if you can point to it and say this, that, the other, but if it did not increase my chances of winning, if I took a move that transferred ownership, then that is the wrong move, and that is kingmaking. The second rule, moving on directly from this, is anything I can do to improve my score or relative position within the hierarchy is, again, the right move. And this one will already be more debatable. I mean, every one of these will be debatable by different people, different groups of people, and by all means, chip in the comments down below what your own perception of kingmaking is, what's allowed, not allowed, and all that. But if I do anything to improve my score or relative position, it is, again, the right move. If the score is currently 94, 87, 80, and I can bump myself up to 89, but by doing so, someone else will now be winning, it is still the right move. Because you're always trying to do your best. I think about it from a thematic stance, which is weird, because usually I'm more mechanics first. But thematically speaking, of course I should be trying to improve my position. And so if you did something, if you set yourself up in a position on the board, in the game, in a way that relies on me not furthering my own relative position, even if I won't win, that doesn't seem like it's thematically appropriate. So you have to defend yourself against all comers. You have to in some way make sure that you're trying to win, but do so while understanding that everyone will always be trying to further their score. And if you didn't account for that, if you then result in you not winning, that's on you. So again, starting with the fact that you want to always try to win, however small a percentage. From there, you always want to improve your relative positioning or score, even if you know for a fact, even if it's the last move of the game. No one else is acting after you. But by taking your last move, you will improve your points, you will improve your score, and now you're transferring the win, then go for it. Then just do that. That's all you need to do. It's fine, as far as my rules go. Number 3, if you take an action that transfers who's winning, in an effort to extend the game, giving you a chance to win, even if that action does not actually change anything else for you, it is still the right move. There are a few games or times where this can happen. Inish is a good example. Cyclades is a good example. The Climbers is a good example. There's a bunch of these small games where sometimes the move you take will not further your own score. It will not increase your chances of winning, although in a way it does because of what we're talking about here. But what it does is it extends the game and it transfers the win condition. But if you didn't extend the game, you would lose. So again, it's the same idea as improving your chances of winning. Inherently, by extending the game, you will improve your chances of winning. Because if the game ends now, you don't win. If the game goes on further, you might win. So extending the game is always the right move, even if it transfers the current winner. By the way, I'm going through these in order of how controversial I think they are. I think the most basic one is improving your chances of winning. From there, improving your score. From there, extending the game with no impact whatsoever, I think is more controversial as well. People are like, you literally just transferred the owner and you didn't even help yourself. You transferred the winner and you didn't even help yourself. And I'm like, I know I didn't help myself, but I'm still playing. And so inherently, I have helped myself. Number 4 is possibly the most controversial. I would say it's not possibly, it's almost certainly the most controversial. Anything you do in the name of revenge when it's clear you can't win anyways. When it's clear you're down to the wire, let's use Nothing Personal as a good example, because I've actually had this happen in Nothing Personal. Nothing Personal. If you're in a game and it's down to the wire, and something you can do that's in the name of revenge, but doesn't improve your chances of winning, but might transfer who is winning. if you can take a move that hurts somebody else, but earlier in the game, and to be very clear, by revenge, I mean within the meta of the game itself, not within the large meta of anything else going on in your life or prior games. But if I screwed you early game in order to put myself at the top, and it comes down to the wire and the last turn of the game, and you can screw me out of the win, I betrayed an alliance, let's say. We agreed to do something. We're playing Rising Sun. I agreed with you. I backstabbed you. I betrayed you. I took you out of the game early, and now I'm about to win. And it's the final turn, and you can't win, but you can ensure that I don't. I still think it's the right move. Because again, approaching this thematically, if I betray all my allies, if I in some way do something that screws someone else over, I should and could be prepping for the fact that they will come back and hurt me. I should not be relying on the idea that, well, it's the end of the game and you shouldn't betray me because you're just kingmaking. No, I screwed you. And so I should be on the defensive and prepared for any assault back the entire time. I am fine with a move that transfers who wins the game if it's in the name of revenge. Revenge within the meta of the individual game being played. Again, this is easily the most controversial from all the ones I'm saying here. Potentially, depending on who you are, you may either agree with me, because you're like, of course, I mean, what's it called? Let's go with another name. Harry backstabbed you earlier in the game, of course you're going to betray him back now. And other people are like, no, it's the final turn of the game, and you can't in any way improve your chances of winning. It's too late. The die has been cast. What Harry did is done and over. You can't just transfer the winner of the game. And I'm like, screw you, Harry. You shouldn't betray me. And keep that in mind. Because I believe in the meta, by the way. I believe in the meta and how it transfers over game to game. I believe the idea, and again, to be clear, the revenge should not transfer game to game. If I inflict revenge on this game because something you did to me last game, that is a whole different conversation which we're not getting into. And, I mean, again, these are my own definitions, so take them as you will. For anything else, for anything outside of those actions, if it doesn't improve your chances of winning, if it doesn't improve your relative score, if it doesn't extend the game so that it improves your chances of winning, and if it doesn't act in the name of revenge, then I believe neutrality is the right action. Not taking an action that transfers the winner, I believe, is the right action at that point. Although again, chaos theory. Anyone can say what they want, do what they want, believe what they want. These are only my rules. If at that point, if none of those rules are fulfilled, and if you take an action that transfers who the current winner is to someone else, but does not in any way fulfill any of the above other conditions, that is what I believe, personally speaking, is kingmaking. What's the takeaway? Nothing. I told you already, there's no takeaway here. If winning doesn't matter to you, this is all hypothetical. This is all game theory, which to me, this is what it is. This is game theory. This is the idea of discussing what should and shouldn't be done. The things that have violated these rules have certainly happened in my game groups in the past, and it has resulted in healthy, enjoyable debates with the people at the table, and not a single person sitting there going, well, I'm not going to play with you again. No, you believe that kingmaking's this. I believe that kingmaking's that. Who cares? If you don't care about winning, this is just game theory and it's just a discussion. If you do care about winning, I have a solution for you. If you do care about winning, and it violates your own rules of what kingmaking should and shouldn't be, pretend that you won. Who cares what other people said? If you believe it's kingmaking, they believe it's not kingmaking, then they can think they won and you can think you won. Does it actually matter? Who cares? Why does it have to be, why do you have to convince them that you're right? If you have an app, if you log your plays, log that you won the game. If you believe that based on your rules, log that you do what you want to make yourself happy in this context. I am all for it. For me, this is just about the discussion. What is kingmaking? What follows the precepts, the rules, the violations? Kingmaking is something, despite all this emphasis on the fact that I'm saying it doesn't care, it is something that can bring disharmony to a game group. It can bring frustration and betrayal. I've only had a handful, I've been playing games now for 2011, for 9-10 years. And in that time, in the thousands and thousands of games that I've played, I have probably had 2 or 3 sessions of frustration at game nights. Frustration like as in a slight underlying hostility at the table. Not just debating, not just arguing, but slight underlying hostility. One of those was about betrayal. Not kingmaking per se, but about betrayal, backstabbery. Someone backstabbed somebody else. Later in the game, they came back and backstabbed them. They felt it was unfair. The other person felt it was fair. That was one time. Another time, wasn't even related to the game at play. It's happened very infrequently. Try to cultivate and grow your game group around the idea that people are there to have fun. These conversations, to me, are fun, but they are just about the conversation. So that's basically it. These are my rules for kingmaking. I'm curious what yours are. What things did I miss? Where do you disagree with me? Or more importantly, more interestingly, do you believe that an early game revenge, a late game revenge play is the right move? if you were betrayed early game and you're inflicting revenge for some betrayal, and betrayal, by the way, to be very clear, does not mean some tiny little infringement. Oh, you took the cards then and I wanted those cards. No, it means something tangible. Not that I incidentally took something you wanted, but that we had an alliance and I screwed you. I marched into your kingdom and took something over. Something actually worthy of betrayal, and then the revenge move comes later. Do you believe that that's fine? Or no, that's terrible, and I should be thrown out of your game group because I'd be violating king-making rules? That's basically it. This is a conversation, an interesting one, a little different than the usual thing, but I always like talking about this stuff, and even though it doesn't matter at all, I wanted to have the conversation. Until next time, I'm Alex Ratcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.